I have a team scattered throughout the globe, 37 countries, hundreds of people. We deliver solutions for basically what we refer to as the life cycle for OT security. And that means everything from helping customers, such as many of you in the room, from policy development all the way through implementing controls, training to managing the environment's security remotely. In addition, I have 3 what we call centers of excellence around the globe, one based here in Atlanta, one in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and the third is in Singapore, and I'm currently building one in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And these centers are unique in that the OT cybersecurity posture business has been evolving so rapidly in the last 5 to 10 years that we use these centers mainly for innovation so that we can look and see what's the next threat that's getting ready to hit the industry, and more importantly, what kind of mitigation techniques can we apply to mitigate those threats. As I'm sure many of you know, the IT business has been doing this for 30, 40 years, not so much in the OT space, and applying IT tools in an OT environment can have some pretty severe negative consequences. So we use these centers as a place to innovate and figure out which ones and how to deploy them. We also use it to train. As I mentioned, we have hundreds of people around the globe that constantly need training on the OT space and on the tools we're using, as well as external customers. We're seeing a lot of end users looking for OT-specific training. And I'm not talking about product training. I'm talking about IEC 62443, fundamentals, things like that, a red team, blue team, all the way specific to OT security. So I probably talked more than you wanted me to, so I'll leave it to you.
No, that's fantastic, Mike. Let's start with some of our questions here for the panel. Operation and cyber resiliency begins with understanding the risk to your business. In your experience, what is the risk and consequence of not prioritizing cybersecurity in OT and IT? Travis, could you start?
Well, okay, I could take that. Well, one of the things that at Toyota we came across is that, so I'm on the cybersecurity side, and I'm leading our cybersecurity program, and we're focused on traditionally IT environments. And then once you get that maturity up, you realize you turn around and half your network is still unsecure. That's your OT environment. And there was a engineer I worked with in a past life, and he pointed me out this way. He's like, cybersecurity, you're always worried about the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. On the OT side, it's the AIC triad, and its availability is paramount to your production. And that's one of the things that you have to understand when you're securing OT environments is OT environments make the company the money. And you never want to be the security guy or the IT guy that brings down production because you've done a scan or you pushed a patch outside of production and now nothing works. But it all comes down to, in my environment, is about building consensus across the IT, OT environment. And one of the things I guess that should also be talked about is that IoT environment also overlaps all that too. But I'll never forget the first time I went and met with our production engineering group, and they're all sitting there with their arms crossed, or leaned back, and I felt really, really like I was stepping into their world, and that they felt that I was coming there to mess everything up and fix or break how they're doing things. But really, you have to start building that consensus. I spent a lot of money on lunches and drinks after work to try to build that kind of relationship that never existed before. Is that cybersecurity was new? It's come into the environment, and with that is that I've learned is that you have to let the OT people come to you. And over that time, we've actually we've developed the Purdue model. We've segregated our flat network that we used to have. That was always a threat. And now, as when we start talking about our environment modernization as far as cybersecurity goes, OT is actually part of that conversation. So,
Mike, I have the same question for you.
I concur. Again, in OT, production is king. We all know that. So therefore, your risk is financial, of course, which is pretty obvious. You know, these production systems generate enormous amount of revenue per hour. So having one down for days or weeks is extremely expensive. Secondly, what people don't think about, it really damages your brand. I mean, go all the way back, I'm an old guy, to Stuxnet. I mean, the brand, that did to damage to Siemens' brand, even though it wasn't their fault, was enormous. Also, you got, in terms of risk, you got to think about these environments have some pretty nasty stuff in them. So there's an environmental risk. So you have to consider that when you start developing your resiliency strategy. And I guess finally, which is kind of top in OT environments, is safety. That's personal safety. If you release chlorine gas, or if it creates a paper sheet flying off the, if anybody's been in a paper mill, you know what I'm talking about, creates a lot of personal safety. So I would say those are all the risks you kind of got to consider when you think about building some type of resiliency strategy.
That makes sense. Let me go on to the next question here is, what strategies are you used to get buy-in within an organization to support your practices? You're trying to put a new system in place. You have to get their buy-in to follow through on what you put together. Mike, if you could.
Buy-in's probably one of the toughest challenges, because we all want to jump to controls, right? Which is good. You got to have controls, but buy-in starts, believe it or not, at the top. I mean, they've got to at least set the standard that OT security is just as important as safety. You go into any plant in the world, and they will not tolerate an unsafe environment. And that's set from the top. They don't accept it. And so I think we're getting there just very gradually in terms of cybersecurity. And so if you have the buy-in from the top, that's where it starts. The second thing we see, again, globally, is companies don't spend enough time on awareness, you know. Why is it important? If you, as an employee of a company, understand the importance of sticking a USB drive or not sticking a USB stick in a drive, I mean, that's very critical to what you come next. Next are the controls and all the other stuff that we like to focus on. But I think before you implement any program, those are probably the two key things you should focus on. Don't overlook those, is my point, you know.
I have to agree with what he said, but also like to add is that, and I probably will use this word more than once during this panel, is consensus, is that no one likes to, even in the IT, you don't like to find out at the last minute that a new product has been bought and we're getting ready to deploy it and it's going in next week and we're going to need your support on this. Is one of the things that we're moving forward in Toyota is that from the IT side and the cybersecurity side in particular, is that we have a lot of tools, especially with our network monitoring and our asset management, is that we have eyes and ears on almost everything, and taking those tools and bringing them over to the OT side is like, hey, we have an asset list of all your OT assets that are digital. You go to the dashboard and look at them. Would that be a benefit past using your spreadsheets that like you have been for the last 15 years? So that's one of the things that, if you can bring value from cybersecurity to OT, that's, like I said, it helps us build that relationship where when we finally get to the point of like, hey, now we have to start pushing firmware updates and patches to the systems, or hey, there's some vulnerabilities in the environment we need to fix, then you actually have an expansion of your cybersecurity team into production team. So.
That's good. But the key, also, the thing you ask, I guess we overlook, is program. That's a very important little word. Cybersecurity is not a thing. It's a group of things. And having a program early on and treating it like a program is pretty key to the success as you roll it out. So just to add that.
Travis, I had a quick question for you around buy-in. How'd you get your senior management to buy into like funding projects around OT?
Well, I will have to say I sort of have a big hammer that is called TICO. That's our parent company in Japan, and one of their major. They have every year they have major initiatives that they want to cover, and one of those on the top of the list is OT security. So it's sort of like the boogeyman. It's like, hey, our mothership says, hey, we need to focus on OT security. Let's figure out what that is before they tell us what that is. So it's like, so that's that's a helps, and I know that most people don't have that. But from there is also being able to, so like our production, we call them production engineering. Our whole production engineering side are almost, I would like to call them legacy employees. They've been with Toyota one form or another for 20, 30 years, and when you can, from my point of view, is when I can speak the language and I know what a PLC is, I know what a SCADA system is, instead of just coming in and saying, hey, we need to fix these problems, is that when you actually know the language, you can actually get that. I will use it again. Consensus. Everybody take a drink. So, but yeah, that's when you're seen as an ally, not opposition. So
That makes sense. So let's move on to the next question here. Is a cyber program includes protect, detect, and respond to threats or breaches. So how do you address these in the resiliency strategy? Mike?
Well, I would also add identify to that.
That's right, identify too.
I think everything starts with your baseline, where you're at. Again, we do this and help companies around the globe, and you see different maturities. A lot of times it depends on what part of the world you're in. Certain parts of the world, due to the geopolitical nature of things going on, are have a different approach than people in Australia, for example. They feel they're at the bottom of the earth. Nobody cares about them. So they have a different strategy. So in the beginning, you need to know where you're at. And there's a lot of companies that do assessments. We like to refer to assessments. And the value of assessments is that it gives you that baseline and your gaps based against standards, right? So you know what the best is like. It gives you a playbook. The second thing you've got to do is determine, and it's different with everybody in this room, what is your risk appetite? How much risk can you take? And then risk tolerance, which is how much can you really take in terms of financial impact. And once you've taken these three pieces and put them together, you can then start to develop a program. And that program, again, is a journey to where you're not going to be able to do everything up front. It may start with policies. It may go to controls. At some point, you got to go to monitoring. The part that we see missed a lot is, again, everybody has different risk appetites. Everybody has risk. That's understood. But the one thing that everyone should understand is, what do I do if I do have an incident? It's that recovery part that we see most often that people don't think about. And we really encourage our customers, regardless of your risk appetite, regardless of your journey, make sure you plan in there, what if? What if I get hit with a virus today, or malware, or ransomware, all the cool buzzwords that are going around right now? How do I react? Do I quarantine? Do I do that? There's a lot of steps that it's much easier to get out of the house that's on fire once you have a plan than to go, oh my gosh, the house is on fire. Do I grab the dog or do I grab my wife? That's a hard decision. I hope she's not in here, by the way. We can't see, so. But anyway, that's what I would say.
And Travis, how'd you guys handle that?
I would have to agree with that. So when I came in 2.5 years ago, there was no cybersecurity program. About the closest we had is we had a managed SOC that responded to any kind of incident or event inside our organization. And So if you look at the NIST CSF, you know, you have the identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover. You really have to start at the end, even though the number one security control, the very first one on all frameworks is know your assets. And it's actually, well, that's fine and dandy, but I don't know anybody that really runs an organization that knows 100% of all their assets and who owns those assets. So we started with being able to detect, then respond, and then recover from that. And then we sort of we worked backwards through the controls. And after that, you know, you focus on all, going back to like the gentleman said before, is that you start with what is the risk appetite of your organization? What are your, you call them crown jewels? What's most important to your organization? You start protecting those first, and then you start filling in all the gaps as you go. So it's as I like to put it, it's job security. So.
So you hold on just a second, guys. You brought up an interesting point about you start from the end and work your way through. Do you do tabletop exercises, like something's happened and you look at the threat, and how do you handle it all the way through?
Oh yeah, that's one of the things is that, so when we were building our incident response plan is that we made sure that we brought in a third party so that way we didn't get, you know, sort of the fox guarding the hen house on this part. And so we ran through multiple different incident response, I guess you could call them scenarios. You know, the first one is everybody always goes to is ransomware. The other one is, you know, just hardware failure. That's one of the things that creates a big incident. You know, your production floor requires a switch, and that switch got hit by a cherry picker or something like that from the painters. And now, do you have backup switches? How fast can you rewire the network or anything like that? So that has to bring in other things that's more than just, you know, the technical response. You have to bring in physical responses too. And that also, when you see the production crew outside on an extended long smoke break, and you know you're hour 4 of a down out an outage, is that yeah, they enjoy it now, but they have to work those 4 hours later. So, but yeah, you have to plan, test, revise, test, revise. It's a continual circle.
And do you have a committee that looks at that? Like, is you're looking through the incidents? Say something happens, you have a ransomware. Who's involved in that decision?
Yeah, we actually have playbooks, and we have, you know, whatever that something like that would happen is that the incident response plan is you pull the fire alarm, and next thing you know, you have HR, you have legal, you have your production, you have the IT team, and you even have our, you know, for us, marketing and sales too involved in all this. So, you know, it's like one of those, you circle the wagons, you bring everyone in, and then from there, you know, maybe half of them are just going to be flies on the wall, but you're still, you know, running your playbook and you're doing the communication plans. You're hopefully that not everybody's on vacation. That's always my fear is go on vacation, and that's when everything starts to burn down. But yeah, it's that continual cycle.
And then just, sorry to keep interrupting you, Mike, I know you want to talk, but I'm curious about, like, do you have pre-planned in your playbooks, like working with the FBI or law enforcement, and also vendors, like other vendors that of some of your equipment? Do you know the right person to call and to get immediate response?
That was actually in our last round of testing our incident responses that we did not have our vendors included. We had our, you know, our infrastructure manager, we had our, you know, our network team, we had our help desk, and then people start thinking it's like, oh, well, you know, let's just say the switch goes out. Well, and we need another one. We're going to need those people on speed dial, and if the people that don't have those relationships aren't in the room, you know, it's things we're going to have to build. And then, you know, I hate to say it, is that when you're a Microsoft shop and you're doing O365 and you have everything in Azure, sometimes you need those guys on speed dial too. And it's like, what is it? One of my colleagues, he said, never make a introduction in a crisis. And that's lessons learned, let's put it that way, so.
Excellent.
Now, I'd love to talk about recovery. As I said, we don't spend enough time on that. But I would bring you back to the beginning. You got to understand what you're protecting yourself from. You hear all about Russian hackers or XYZ hackers. The reality is, at least from our position and experience, is most likely your incident's going to come from within your four walls. We see a third of the interventions that we're involved with is coming in through some malware not necessarily intentional, or sometimes it is intentional, employees, but inside. So how do you protect against that? Those are quick wins. So again, understand who you're protecting yourself from, and that will determine your controls, that will determine your policies. But in all instances, to his point, don't lose focus of the recovery side, because that translates into significant dollars. I mean, we've seen plants that not have it be down for over a month, and you can just imagine the production and brand damage that something like that can do. And yet we've seen the other that have good programs like this be up in a couple days. Significant difference.
At this point, I'd like to take some questions from the audience. So if we can get a microphone out there, and I know it's hard for everyone to see.
I have a question. I don't need a mic. My name is Brian Schleifer. Go by Schleifer. How did you get funding for the COEs?
Well, my persuasive personality. Basically, it was that. We started the cyber business, like I said, about 10 years ago. It was, again, Honeywell, the group I belong in, is a DCS vendor. That's what they do. They make DCS control system. And to me, the thing that changed in that world was when they put Ethernet at the plant and created this, or started using this technology called Microsoft. That was the game changer, right? So security became to the forefront then. And so we started this and, hey, there's going to be a space for this. And we went out, we started hiring people and focusing on that, and the business started growing. And then it became, from our customers, well, what happens if? Like similar to your scenarios. And so, well, to do that, we need to build an environment. So in these COEs, they are running DCS systems, not just Honeywell, because we work on a third of our business has no Honeywell in it at all. It's all the other vendors that are out there, because we needed those environments to not only test control, like Fortinet or other vendors. There's, like I said, in IT, there's hundreds of vendors. I mean, most of them are knocking on our door every week, and we want to take those technologies and have a place that we can apply them real time. So it's basically making the business case that says, hey, if we do this, we're going to develop a new portfolio. We're going to educate our customers on the importance of this. We have hundreds of customers come through these COEs every year. And the first one was pretty easily funded. We presented it. The other two was a piece of cake. In fact, the one in Singapore, we got a partnership with the Singapore government and got some joint cooperation there. The one we're building in Saudi right now, I don't know, probably most of you aren't familiar with Saudi. Saudi has some extremely strict rules around OT security. You got to be in country. Thou shalt follow these rules. And so that made it easy to justify that, because there's a business case there, right? We're going to generate money, because the more I educate customers, the more they see the importance, the more they come to us to help us be their partner on this journey. So hope that answers your questions.
Awesome.
If not,
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that.
yep.
Hey, Mike, that seems like an ideal place for testing, like that you can test different gear for customers. I mean, if anyone used your lab for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, these are environments that are just like a plant. I mean, a lot of virtualized, they've got multiple vendors, multiple PLCs. We have physical pumps. We got physical meters, just like you would imagine in a plant. The one in Duluth there has got basically a small little chemical plant in there, so you're running real time. So we have customers that say, I'm looking at doing, again, I'll just use a scanning application on our control vendors are very restricted, by the way. They don't like you running stuff on their environments. But customers have to do what they have to do to protect their environment. So they may say, I want to run a scanner, buy this scanning tool, but I want to see how it works. So they'll come in our labs. We have 90% of what they have. They may ship us a couple of controllers or something. We'll put it, and then they can come in there and test it. Another example, to your point, I'm sure you're familiar with a SIM. SIMs are extremely expensive. So they can come in our environment. They're thinking about spending $500,000 again for a SIM, very advanced. That's further down the maturity level. But before you do it, you want to make sure that you know what you're getting. Well, in these environments, we have 2 of every security control you can think of. So it's in the environment. They can come, they can put their hands on it, they can play with it, and the customer gets value out of that. And again, the value for Honeywell is it improves our credibility, it improves our reputation in the market, and of course we're all in it to get business eventually down the road. So I don't know where he went because I can't see him.
I'm back over here. I could just see the audience better for questions.
I can't see anything.
Any other questions? I saw one over here, I think. Yeah.
I'm a consultant in the federal space.
Sorry to hear that.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the terms STIGs and SRGs. And it's security implementation guide, and yeah. And what they are is they're documents for how to secure the equipment. Do you plan as a company to provide information to cybersecurity designers to be able to better design their cybersecurity implementation for government projects, federal projects? Because there's a new UFC out which is making far more requirements. And I didn't know if you had a package available for cybersecurity people to reference for interfaces and capabilities.
We don't do an enormous amount in government, mainly because government is such a challenge. There's so many pieces of paper you got to check and fill out, and it's like we do everything else in our life. But we do have, in the base industry, we have that. We have guidelines for if you want to secure a control system. Again, it's all based out of IEC 62443 with a smattering of NIST, but mainly 62443. Those guidelines pretty much permeate. I don't care where you go in the world, every standard is based on those foundations. And so we have, in our DCS system, it comes with a how do you secure a system? It's a kind of a playbook. But again, in every system, it depends on what does your system look like? What are you trying to do? There's a lot of caveats. So it's high level, in terms of segmentation, who should talk to do. If you're going to bring remote in, this is how you should bring it in, things like that. So we have those guides, but not so much specific for the government stuff. We're just now starting. We've done 2 or 3 projects now in the government. We're trying to, I say this all the time, we compete on credibility. And I don't want to just put a PowerPoint slide out there that says I can do all this stuff. So we've done a couple projects. We're figuring out all those forms that you need. We're figuring out which companies and consultants we need to work with, because it is, as you, I'm sure, know, is extremely complex process, and anywhere along that way, if you step wrong, it derails the whole thing and creates twice as much work. So
Just looking for something that was, pretty simple, just for each type of device, for the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. That's all.
yeah, we got it at the device level, we got it at the controls level, but not so much that aligns for the requirements of the government.
Thank you.
So I can consider that a hardening guide?
Well, it's more than hardening. It's hardening in terms of the group policies and all, but it's also architecture. Everything starts with architecture, and we emphasize this all the time. It's much easier to design security in the beginning than it is to bolt it on later. I mean, you're looking at 4x cost, easy. So these are guidelines on when you actually, I think what he's asking about is how do I architect a greenfield or a new system, as well as we do have guidelines around hardening, and which, again, hardening beyond the device to the environment is what I'm saying.
It kind of brings up an interesting question for me, for Travis. Do you have, you have policies in place that you need to monitor and keep up to date? I mean, do you do that on a continuous basis, or is it once a year, or an audit team comes in, or?
Well, that's one of the things that has been the largest cultural shift is that, our company has worked a particular way for so long, and then you bring in a security program that sort of tilts that on its head. But yes, that's one of the things that, at a minimum, our policies and our procedures are reviewed every year. And I know some of those slip, but every time there's also an architectural change or we bring in a new technology, is that those policies have to be revised. And to keep everybody honest is always bringing a third party. Is that so you don't, as the VP of technology at Toyota, he said, you don't want the foxes guarding the hen house, so to say. So.
Compliance is, again, I can tell you around the globe, you're going to see that in the U.S. in the next couple of years, come a lot more teeth than we've had. We're seeing it around the globe that there's a lot of regulatory requirements around compliance. It's nice to say you do things. It's more important that you can prove that you do things. And so I think the U.S. is probably, well, North America, I should say, is probably a little far behind the rest of the world. We put some guidances out there about what we're seeing in other countries. They're putting a lot of teeth to that. I'm on the board in Singapore as an example. I mean, you can't deliver OT security if you're not certified by the government in that country. And anybody caught doing it, it's not a good thing. So, and we all know the Middle East has been far ahead of that. Europe's starting to change in the individual companies. So it's coming, compliance. So you might as well start thinking about it now,
Any other questions from the audience? I kind of have one for everyone in the audience. If you can just raise your hands. I'm curious as to how far you are along in your journey. Like, are you just beginning? Like, if you can raise your hand. And then how about, like, you've been doing this for a while and you've got some policies in place. And then more advanced, like where Toyota might be, where you have a whole program put together and you're doing incident response, tabletop. Is anyone there? So kind of most of you are in the beginning, and then we have a few in the other two areas. It's very interesting. So my last question here for you guys is, what is the best practice for a continuous program? I think you touched on it a little bit, Travis, where you have policy reviews every year. But how do you keep this going?
Well, one of the things is, yes, you have to do continuous improvement. And in Toyota, we have the term called Kaizen, which is slow, continuous improvement is of all processes and policies, et cetera, inside our organization, which we actually adopt that over to our technology side, especially in cybersecurity. But sometimes, it's one of those things that when you're building a brand new environment, and it helps to have a cybersecurity champion, either in the OT, IT side. This is something that I've learned from other roles and other jobs, is that if there isn't that person, you should take that on yourself to be that person. And some companies have the luxury of having large cybersecurity teams that are in corporate OT or separate OT cybersecurity teams. And then some of you may just be that lone wolf, working in your environment. And with that is one of my biggest pieces of advice is, like I said, if you don't have that champion in your organization, be that champion. Learn all you can about it and be that annoying person that's always talking about security. So.
I guess you want me to say something else?
Please, Mike.
I concur with everything he said. I guess the best practice is spend the time up front to develop a plan. I would also say look to partner if you don't have the skills. I couldn't see how many people raised their hands, but what we see around the world, that this is an emerging area. So look for a partner that has the experience of doing this, because it is fairly complex and different than IT. And then finally, to follow up on something Travis said earlier, or you said earlier, make sure whatever you put into place that you test it and validating. Tabletop exercises is an excellent tool. It doesn't cost a lot of money, doesn't take a lot of effort, but that's an excellent tool to ensure that you are ready should the event happen, and then you have your mitigating rules and processes in place to minimize the damage that something like that would cause.
One of the major benefits of a tabletop exercise is you can't break anything. So
We tried, but yeah.
it's all imaginary or virtual. So that's,
It's a good tool. I mean, we do quite a bit of them. If you really, again, I couldn't see hands. If you're more advanced, then we're seeing we're doing a lot more pen testing of the OT environment now. In pen testing, you can break stuff, though. I'll tell you. So you better be careful who you engage to do that. But that's the next level to start leveraging that tool. In the beginning, we didn't see much of that, but now we're seeing, we've developed, I know at Honeywell, we've got some processes and stuff that we make sure that we don't damage anything. We go to a certain level and have some mitigating tools that help us. But that's the next level for those of you that maybe are further along the curve of maturity. But tabletop exercises, like I say, we do those all the time, and extreme amount of value to really validate where you're at in your process. And that's what I want to reemphasize. You want to test and validate, you know. Because I can tell you, in the simpler term, backup and restore, I can tell you how many times we go in, customers had an event, and, okay, we're going to restore the system, and the guy, first of all, spends half the morning looking for the DVD that has his backup on it.
Right.
And then when he finds it in the desk, guess what? It doesn't work. You know, that validation part is extremely critical and is often overlooked.
That's a very good point. I just thought of another question I want to ask, and it's kind of going back to the beginning.
Okay, we get paid by the question.
Yeah,
So.
so let me go back to the beginning. Travis, you were talking about putting a program in place, and one of the things that I always found difficult on the sales side or business development side is we'll have a plan, and we want to do remediation, and we're waiting for a downtime event to do some of that work. How do you manage that at Toyota?
well, it's a very difficult process because in our manufacturing environment, we only have 2 weeks a year where the OT environment is offline. And if you could imagine, so we refreshed our whole network over the last couple of years. Imagine installing a whole plant-wide worth of switches and firewalls and APs and just, well, actually, you don't get the whole week. You only get like 3 to 4 of those days because you still have to test. And then the production side, they have to make sure that all their systems are up and running before you come back to work. So that is like, I guess the best way you could put it is like trying to invade Normandy in World War II. You have to do a lot of planning. Is you have to make sure you have all your vendors in line, all the people that are actually going to be doing the installation. Everybody knows what code is going to be injected on these devices. It's one of those all hands kind of things. Is that we've even had janitors help us out. So sometimes you need to. Especially when you're talking about safety, is that you have to figure out who's actually qualified or can actually be on a lift or a cherry picker or stuff like that. So you have to get the help where you can. So, but yeah, if you don't have that restricted time zone like we do, that's actually a benefit. But I actually think bringing it all back around is that it's actually helped us actually do things a lot more intelligently and actually reduced our mistakes because everything's planned again, checked, double checked before it's go time.
I think doing things from a security standpoint during a shutdown is a luxury. I'd say about 3/4 of the work we do is on process. Wow. But to his point, you had better plan it, and you better have done it before, because the downside is not very good. It shortens your career, though. That's a good part.
Thank you for that. So we're concluding our panel now. I'd like to thank Travis and Mike for their time and expertise in getting up on stage for everybody. I'd like to thank the audience for participating and joining our panel discussion. And we Fortinet invites you to come by the booth and learn more about our products and our services from our sales engineers. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate you all sitting through this.